Rolling. The cameras are recording. Yeah. Welcome to Easy Awakenings. Today we're back with, you guys remember this, Paula Drewek from The Ego in Me.
Yes.
Superstar. That's right. That's right. Yeah, we're here to talk today about a lot of stuff, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's just kind of get right into it. So, Paula, so I know people have seen the Ego in Me. They kind of know your background a little bit, but you were a professor of religious studies, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And humanities. Actually, I started out teaching humanities because I love the arts. They just really send me to wonderful places.
Okay.
And then it became a possibility to have a class in comparative religions. The dean at the time gave it to our department. Nobody in philosophy wanted that job. So I said, well, I've had one class in comparative religions. I'll do it because I think religion is very important. People need to know more about it. I wanted to learn more about it. So that's how it got kicked off in 1972. And I did that until I retired. So it was
When did you retire?
From teaching in 2005, and then from the institution in 2007.
Okay.
The last couple years, I was part of a team called Macomb Multicultural International Initiatives, and we wanted to literally lay the groundwork for Macomb becoming an institution that welcomed people of diversity, whose faculty represented that, and whose programs represented that. And of course it was very timely. We used the changing demographic of Macomb County as part of our clout for getting that program off the ground because it required some administrative support. So it was very worthwhile. It's still going on. It's had its 10-year in the past, and it works largely through the Macomb Community College library now.
I see. So through your experience of teaching, like the religious studies, and so did you teach like world religions? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So what has been your experience? Like most people appreciate like learning the different faiths. Does it deepen their faith when they learn about other faiths? Like what was the experience?
You guessed it. It deepens people's own faith, and my approach to teaching was always you have to have the experience as well. Just reading about learning facts is kind of meaningless. And essentially religion is all about giving meaning to life. And so I think that's a very important thing, that people have some meaning in their lives. And religion to me is the obvious bedrock for developing that. So I taught about Native Americans because they're a favorite of mine. And of course, America gave rise to that. So it's very in our neighborhood, something we should know about. And then starting with Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the Baha'i faith is one of the new religions, and then Hinduism and Buddhism. So essentially there were 7 religions I covered every semester.
Yeah.
So I know I asked you this before, but the Baha'i faith, I used to have the concept that Baha'i was sort of a collection of the various
syncretistic,
religions. Okay.
Probably
So
because people understand that the Baha'is accept the spiritual, the religious foundations of all the major world religions. We say these are all valid. There are parts of the plan of God for developing humanity spiritually and socially towards what we think is now the final goal, which is the unity of humanity, the unity of humankind. And so we see them all as legitimate steps as part of that process. And that probably is why people thought of it as synchronistic.
Okay.
So Paula is also the host now on the show Interfaith Odyssey, and that's Paula and I have known each other for many, many years.
Oh, yes.
Oh, so you're still doing Interfaith Odyssey?
Oh, yeah, she's the host now.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And I was on that show, and we met each other, and then we went to Wisdom, and so we've had
a lot of history.
Yes,
Most of it connected with religions.
Yeah.
And I always thought Raj Tasha's sharing of her Sikh faith was the closest to my own of anyone else on that show. And I always respected her a lot. She spoke from an authentic place, and I think, well, that's very important when you're teaching religions. I try to
think it's
teach
important always,
religions
but definitely
from
so.
an objective place, so that when I taught Native American or I taught Hinduism, I tried to put myself into that context.
Yes.
And so I did that as best I could, and then offered students the experience of going to places where this was practiced and learning about it in an experiential way.
Okay. That's it. I remember some of my time in China. I'm very fascinated in Taoism. The Tao Te Ching, Tao Te Ching is one of my favorite books. that probably influenced me more than any other book on earth. Yeah. And so when I went to China, I was super excited to go to some of these temples to meet some of the monks. And they don't call them monks; they call them, I think, Daolings, I think is the proper term.
I've never been to a Taoist temple in China.
Yeah.
And I didn't find it represented very much at all.
You're right.
amongst the people I encountered.
They're very, very hard to, I shouldn't say very hard to find. If you're Chinese, you know where they are. But they're not, you definitely don't see them as much as you do the Buddhist temples.
Oh, yeah.
And even some of the, the Christian churches.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they're usually they're situated like on the foothills of a mountain.
Okay, well, that would explain.
So you'd have to go climbing up 1,000 plus feet just to reach.
A group of educators. We were traveling to cities that had universities and interacting with the university programs for the most part. So.
Okay.
But Taoism, I always thought of it as kind of the opposite of Confucianism. I always taught those together when I taught Asian religions.
Okay.
Because in Taoism, you kind of go with the flow. You yield.
Yeah.
Strength is in yielding yourself to the circumstances around you.
Right.
Whereas in Confucianism, there's a certain order of relationships that is very fixed.
Yeah.
And the way you ascend and become successful is through knowledge. It was the first religion to actually make how much you knew part of government posts.
Okay.
So they had the tests that would shades of today that would show how much you actually know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, when I went to Delhi last year, I went to the Baha'i temple, the Lotus Temple in New Delhi. Oh, it was just beautiful. It was so beautiful. Yeah. And the people are just so friendly and open and welcoming. Yeah.
Well, it is like an oasis in New Delhi because it has rather large grounds around it. In fact, when I went to do my PhD research, I did it in India, and that was where I went first. And I became a guide at the house of worship there for a month.
Oh, you
and
did?
This way, I figured I would get to know the Indian people. And I discovered that really all of the world traipses through there because it's a major site on any tour bus. And it was a way for me to get to appreciate more the Indian flavor of living and values. And so I learned a lot.
Oh, yes. I mean, there were long lines to get in.
I think
Long
the busiest
lines.
day
Oh.
that I
Baha'i faith
recall
and, okay.
was
Yeah, the Baha'i
50,000
temple.
people in one Sunday. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah. I guess so. The story I went. So when I found one of these Taoist temples, I went in there thinking, it'd be nice to, meet some of these guys and to share my excitement for Taoism. And the first thing the guy said to me, it's like, I've studied the Tao since I was 14. When I first read it, he's like, oh, did you read it in Chinese or English? I said, oh, English. He's like, you have not read the Tao at all. I was sort of disillusioned. I was so happy to go out there.
Well, could he speak English?
He could not speak English. No. I speak some Chinese, though, so I was able to converse a little bit back and forth with him.
I see. Okay.
But we lose so much in translation of any of
absolutely.
of those texts, of those scriptures.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
because they're just words that you just simply cannot, express in another language.
Well, unless you have the experience of living it. And
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
the key
Yes.
for really understanding.
Yeah.
I remember when I first went to India, I'd learned about Hinduism only from books. I didn't even know any Hindu people really well. This is, maybe, 40 years, 50 years ago now? And, India is practicing Hinduism was so different. It was all about going to temple and reverence for the various deities and the mythology. And I thought, well, most of what I've been teaching is the philosophical. And my mentor at University of Ottawa, when I did my PhD work, he had in his mind two kinds of religion. There was the learned approach, which is essentially what you get in academe.
Sure.
And then there's what everybody else does. Which was really the popular practice. So.
Sure. And religions they fall away from the core of what they represented over time. So much extraneous matter sort of gets piled on top of like practice, and the belief system they start to splinter, right? Instead of just Christianity, instead of believing in God, it becomes, well, now you're Christian. Then there's a split between Christianity and Judaism, and then Islam as well. And then you have, I'm not just Christian, I'm a Protestant Christian. I protest against the Catholic Church. So then there's a split within that split, and then so on. So then you have like 42,000 different sects of Christianity.
I think it is
it's the people that
the
do
human
it.
desire to control. Here we are again. There is a book I encountered early in my religious training by Nels Ferrer called The Sun and the Umbrella.
Okay.
And what you've described is how people like to make these umbrellas of comfort within their own context.
Okay.
Oh, this is comfortable. Then I don't have to think about the big picture, which is, of course, represented in this metaphor by the sun. And the sun, let's face it, is very powerful and very hard to approach. So I think that's why, of course, Baha'i says that religion requires renewal.
Okay.
Because we do this. We add these accretions onto a religion, and I'm assuming it's still going to happen. But like your Sikh faith, the Baha'i faith is really very text-oriented. It's focused with authority on the scriptures. And so as long as individual people stay in tune with and knowledgeable about those scriptures, I think there is less danger for this kind of splitting off and developing, well, here's my version of the Baha'i faith, and don't you want to follow me, or some such thing.
Well, I think a lot of it plays into control. Religion hits to the core of our identities and our beliefs. So it almost makes sense that if you're a ruler of some kind, you want to hold the right religion, and you want to get people to follow your version of what the truth is as much as possible. And so maybe that kind of leads us into discussion of violence in religion. That's where does for our endeavors with religion. We were just speaking with a Buddhist monk last week.
Okay.
And
who was it?
Hoden Sunan.
Oh.
Yeah, he'll be on. Okay. That episode will be released soon. We promise.
As soon as Marquise gets some time.
Okay. There you go. I'm actually about 40 minutes into it. It's just like that. You have to rewatch.
Editing is it takes time.
But yeah, no, he made a very good point. He was saying that, at the core of a lot of religious practices, it's about living a good life, being an aware person, and treating others well, and things of that nature. And he said if people actually lived like that, there would be no need for religion. And there's a lot of other stuff that's involved with it, but you can sort of see that how when people get a hold of this idea and people's identities, that's when they begin to just clamp down and say, okay, follow me or you're gonna die, or follow me and we're gonna kill these people because they don't believe in us, to gather more followers and more control.
Well, I think to some extent that is true. If people followed the the ethics that all faiths teach,
Mm-hmm.
we would have less need of religion. But there is still a need for a social order because we live in communities and groups.
Sure,
and today, the world is in a new phase of community building in that it's really very international.
Yeah.
And so I think the justification for at least the Baha'i faith is that it offers a pattern for living together in a global world.
Okay.
So certainly the ethics are renewed, but so far the pattern for living together has been one person's view. No, that's mine, which of course gives rise to, as you mentioned, the violence against faith.
Yeah.
And I find that very unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's just the conflict is always one belief against another belief. It's always one belief against another belief, and there's no resolution. So it just continues through the generations. You know, if we don't resolve, let's say if you and I have a conflict, Paula, if we don't resolve it, we're going to carry it forward, right?
Probably, yes.
And the minute we resolve it and we forgive and we literally forget, now we're sisters again. You know, we're now like together again. So I think religion's the same way. It's just, you know, we get these set of beliefs, and then that becomes what helps us to really, you know, get some control. You know, that God is created the way that we think God is. You know, it's not God didn't create us; we created God.
Right,
you know,
right.
Yeah,
it becomes like
unfortunately.
that.
Like
And
a
so
question.
India, like in Hinduism, actually there was really no God. That's why they had all these deities.
Yeah.
Because it's like anything, even a stone can be part of God. It's more seeking. Like I don't really know what God is. God can be in the stone. God can be. God is in you. God is everywhere. So let me just seek. There was never this identity.
Is that why they call it a Sikh?
Oh, come
Is that
on
what
now.
Sikhism?
Seek, actually, that's what seek is.
Is it? I got it.
Yeah, you got it. You hit it. It is.
That's good.
Sikh is somebody who's always learning, always being the student, always that student, that having that kind of like in Zen, the beginner's mind, where you don't know anything, right? You don't know anything, even the things that you know, you just say,
And the more you know, the more you know you don't know. That's,
Exactly.
That's it.
yeah.
Well, something about what you said, Raj. So that kind of makes me wonder. Like, if you think about the structure of religions that came about 10,000 years ago, started to form back then, they were based more on observation. It seemed to be more on seeking answers in what's around you. And then around the time of the big three, we'll call them, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam,
The Abrahamic.
it was more about dominance. It was about the father figure. You know what I'm saying? Do you agree with that? Do you see what I'm talking about, or am I misunderstanding this sort of thing?
Well, I think that simplifies it a little too much, but yes,
Okay.
the sky god religions,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
call
yeah.
up them, and of course that idea of the sky god works its way into India as well. But thinking of God as up there and controlling things, I think that's a very, can I say, childish view of
Sure.
how I would think of God, and it maybe satisfied the child stage of humanity's development, but it just ain't enough anymore. And so seeing the spirit, seeing the reflection of God's attributes of beauty and grace and courtesy and humility and wisdom and all of that within one's own environment, I think that provides a way for us to come together and we can agree on those values. So why focus on well, we do it this way, and you can't, or something.
Yeah, your way is just stupid.
Or something
It's not only
trivial.
stupid, I'm going to kill
Because
you
there
because
are
it's
so
right.
many beautiful things in the world about which we agree.
Okay.
And I think then we
Yeah.
need to focus on those.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So finding that common thread with another person. I'm sure that's what they do when you have conflict mediation.
Yeah.
That process tries to get the point of view far enough up there to see, well, what do these people both care about? And then you have a dialogue about those positive things.
You know, I'm a yoga instructor as well,
Yeah.
and one of the things that we do in these postures, in these asanas, is you create oppositional forces within you.
Oh,
Okay, through the posture. So one part of your body is going up, another part's going down, one part's pushing back. So you're using all the different dimensions of your body. So once you create these oppositional forces, now you use your breath to allow these forces to resolve.
oh,
And that's how your body can literally like heal itself and all of that. So you create the oppositional forces and then you're breathing into it, and then everything starts to come together. So it's kind of like that. So opposing views, opposing forces, the only way to bring them into harmony is to neutralize. So, like, I love what you're speaking to, Paula, about bringing everything to that common, neutral place.
what we share.
Whether it's within our body, whether it's at the cellular level, whether it's at the human level, whether it's at the mind level, you know, our whole belief systems. If we have an opposing belief with somebody, let's just sit with it.
Yeah.
A little bit, you know, let's just see, let's just marinate, and let's see if, you know, there's a common ground. Why is that person having the need to feel that way? Why am I having the need to feel this way? Maybe my position is, I think it's right, but, you know, and I have justifications. So I think the same thing with these conflicting, this, you know, religious violence, this, even if you look within religions, look how much violence is in the within the religions themselves.
Yes.
You know, it's
Well,
not
because
even
it's
with
part
another
of-
religion.
It's part of human
You
life.
go to the
Exactly.
temple.
Yeah.
You know, you go to the Sikh temple sometimes, and they're fighting with each other. It's like, wait, what's going on here? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you go into a Christian, your Protestants are fighting
Sure.
with Lutherans and this and that. You know, so it's like, what is that?
I
How
attribute-
come we don't question it?
I attribute a lot of that to identity. I think identity is the core to almost every mental emotional conflict that we have.
Well, then you have to read Eric Erickson.
Okay.
And how identity is formed through certain life crises as
Yeah.
one matures.
Okay.
Roger's
Absolutely.
probably more familiar with that than myself, but yeah, that idea of how you form that identity and with whom and with what values. But your explanation of yoga, I never heard that before. That you bring these opposing forces together and then you just resolve them through your breathing.
Yeah.
You might think about how that applies to opposing forces in
Raj teaches yoga, by the
way.
Our classes are available on Tuesdays.
My friend Brenda Rosenberg kind of does that with a program she calls Tectonic Leadership.
Okay.
I remember reading about tectonic plates as those geological formations under the Earth's surface, which are shifting.
Right.
And so she brings people of different backgrounds together purposely and uses this program to allow them to confront those differences and work them out.
Okay. You know, it's amazing. I always think of I talk so much about my time in China because it was a huge
It's a
impact.
major thing.
Yeah, that was big for you. Yeah.
But so it was interesting because I would always notice, you typically think of yourself like, oh, if we're going to get into groups, right, the Americans would go with the Americans, the French would go with the French, you know, the Chinese are with the Chinese. But when you go to like a country where there's a predominant, you know, race or culture, it was typically the Chinese and then the foreigners. So if I found it much easier to relate to say, so my best friends in China were French. And like there was that common ground. So it's almost as if when you start removing the layers of complexity, the layers of identity, you'd find the common ground. Because I guarantee you take, let's say you're in, let's say you go to Russia or Africa or something, right? And it's you and a Chinese guy, and the bulk of people there are all African.
Yeah.
They have their culture, and what do you share in common? You're both different. So then you're removing that complexity, and then you have that unique sort of sharing, and it allows you to then bond with those people. You'll set aside your differences, because that's where the two of you meet. So.
Well, it reminds me of the folks I met when I was at the Baha'i House of Worship in New Delhi. The people there came from all over the world. One of my favorite people was a Russian lady, and she and I couldn't speak the same language, but we would sing favorite Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff melodies as we would go home at night. And that was my connection with her. And there were others. I had a roommate from South Africa. Now I heard Africa. Oh, well, why are you white? I didn't know the geography and history of South Africa at all. She was from Pietermaritzburg. And then there was people from Australia. So these Baha'i houses of worship, I think this is true pretty much around the globe, wherever they are, they bring together all these nationalities who then get to know one another in service. And that, I think, is a missing link for how it is you get people who are so different to learn to accept one another and like one another and be part of a human community, not just a Russian or a French or an Australian community. Because they're serving together, they're doing things together. And so I think that's one reason that service has always been a very great part of your faith. I know the Sikh faith, the Baha'i faith, and our common organization that we had with Wisdom, because we have members of all these 7 or 8 different faiths working together.
That's it. That's one of the positives that I think religion doesn't get enough credit for, because religion's under attack these days, man. People they're bashing it left and right, But I think that's one of the positives that religion has done. It's unified people. In some ways, it's definitely split some folks apart, but it has served to unify people from across the globe. I mean, Christianity alone, you look at how many different countries it's sort of, brought some influence into. And then that's become a common ground for a lot of folks in these different countries to sort of find a bonding principle at the very least. So it's notable. It's noteworthy.
Well, then you suggest that we all look for those bonding principles which we can recognize and develop as bonds among people of all backgrounds, rather than listening to the media, which has become somewhat hateful lately, and thinking that, we have to take our little specific thing and identify ourselves with this, and so we actually wall ourselves off from anybody who doesn't feel this particular way. And that's the opposite direction. So I think that our culture can do a lot towards leading us to develop those bonds, especially if we start teaching techniques like that in the schools. And I know that is part of the trajectory of Easy Awakenings, is helping people develop in a positive way rather than focus on these narrow identities that divide them. So
that absolutely is one of our main focuses.
I think that's wonderful what you're doing.
Well, our whole goal is to really, it's to get people to understand that they're not that different from other folks. That and you take a look at like mental health. There's always this tendency to look at someone that's having mental health issues as being different. We had a podcast on mass shootings the other day, and there's this notion like, these people that are doing these horrible things are so different from me. Well, maybe they're not that different. Maybe that's why it's proliferating so much. Why we're having so many complications is because we're not doing enough to understand ourselves in relation to these other people. Instead, it's, I would never do that because I'm not crazy. It's like, well, what really is crazy? You know, there are people whose wires are definitely crossed. I mean, you just, you know, those are folks that have some serious issues. But I
That's
think
a very small percentage, right? That whose wires are really crossed,
Exactly.
like, to the point, you know, where they have physiological issues. But for a lot of people, it's just just a lot of misguided.
Yeah, it's like they're being
belief
pushed.
systems.
They're pushed to that edge, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, what does it really take for all of us to snap? You know, how far are you?
If we were maybe raised in that household with the same temperament, personality, you know, I mean, maybe I would have done it even worse. Who knows?
Exactly.
I can't say for sure.
Exactly.
You know, I don't know. I just it's really hard to determine.
Put yourself,
we can't put ourselves, but we do know one thing. We do know that if we don't start to do something about it, it's going to impact all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to impact every single one of us. I don't care if we're religious or not religious, because this is our future, this new generation coming up. And if they're not able to understand and come to, you know, a place where they know who they are, the power that they have, what they can create, they can be good human beings, you know, constructive human beings. I don't know about good, I don't know good and bad, but at least constructive, you know,
at least feeling a part of the whole.
Yes.
Well, I did my research in psychosociology of religion, and so I took a whole class in Jung, and I encountered Jung again with
that's Carl Jung for those listeners.
Yes, Carl Jung, in the philosophy of Irene de Clermont de Castillejo, and it made such sense to me that, well, we have this shadow side, she calls it. And so I actually taught a unit in my humanities class.
Oh, you did?
All about the shadow side. And it was easy to do because there was the Avengers series with Arnold Schwarzenegger, whatever role he played. I think it was Avengers.
Schwarzenegger was in the Avengers? No.
Well, what was the name of his films?
For which?
Terminator.
Okay,
Terminator.
Not the Avengers. Wait a minute.
Okay, and it was also when the Phantom of the Opera came out, and of course you could draw on the literature of Frankenstein, and of course Jekyll and Hyde, and all of the Poe works. And I think there's a lot to this. When we reject something so firmly, we do so out of fear that it's in here.
Yeah.
And that's the thinking that it suggested to me, so that, as you say, there are these potentialities in all of us, and we choose which ones to develop rather than feeling the victim of outside forces. And so exactly what you're doing is teaching people the power that they have to create their own life.
You're right. I think you touched on something very important. So I've always, whenever I hear about, someone who's so adverse to homosexuality, someone who's that against someone like gay folks getting married, why do you really care about what someone else is doing with their partner? You know, like, it doesn't affect you. You're not gay. Right? Or if you're that against it, are you really hiding something? Do you have, sort of homosexual desires that are maybe buried deep within, and you're afraid of that? You don't like that part of yourself, and that's why you're hating these
reject
folks.
That.
Yeah. And so people think about that. If you're really that anti-gay, maybe there's a part of you that you need to take a look at. You might share a little more with someone who's homosexual than you realize.
Yeah, but coming to that realization would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Because of, well, a number of factors.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of fear, I think, around that. And I think that, they want to keep it away from their kids, and they don't want their children to turn out like that, or maybe they have their own confusion around it, their own sexual identity. So, Yeah, there could be a lot of reasons why somebody's,
And fear also of other religions.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well,
Fear of other, it's all fear
it would be
based.
so simple to investigate the things that you find at odds with your own background, would it not?
Right.
And there should be a curiosity about those.
Yeah.
That's
so
so
that you
interesting.
keep
I've never
learning.
gone to a house of worship. I don't care what faith it is, where I have not felt good.
Yeah.
You know, I can go to any house of worship and it's peaceful. It's so nice and
It's
sweet.
orderly.
You know, it feels good. I mean, it's a good feeling to go into a house. So I haven't been. I've traveled all over the world. I've never been to a house of worship where I was like, oh, I just don't like that. You know,
Yeah.
I think, oh, that's
I've
terrible.
I've encountered a couple, but it wasn't religion specific. It was that particular setting. Just like I got a few. There's one not too far from where we are right now. I got this weird vibe where it felt a little racist. That was the vibe that I got, and it was just listening to a few of the folks sort of speak.
I mean,
You could sort
informally.
informal, exactly. They weren't under scrutiny, so you heard them. They were more open about things, and some of the things that they were saying, they weren't very inclusive of other cultures.
Yeah, and I see, and when I go into a house of worship, I'm never focused on the kind of people there.
Okay.
I'm just looking at that
The architect,
that opportunity to connect
Sure.
to something much bigger than myself. You know, and so I'm not really focused on what the people are doing, because everywhere you go, people are going to be doing things.
Oh yeah, I think largely speaking,
that
you're right.
trigger
I mean,
us, you know.
you go to like these temples and these churches, and they definitely bring about, if anything, they bring about a sense of calm. And that's that orderly calmness that they bring about when you walk into a place of worship.
I don't know. I've been to some African American churches where it's really going.
Live, okay.
I like that too, though. I like that, because that's a part of me that's like, come on, let's go.
Right.
A lot of energy, a lot of
energy.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, but it's positive energy.
Yeah, it
no,
is.
definitely,
It is.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we could all be so.
That's the most enjoyable experience I've had in the church.
We could all be so loose with our emotions.
And so excited about
about being together.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, it's true.
Yeah. It's really, I'm always taken back by, how they're just able to kind of let loose in churches like that. People are just so into it. And
I think it's definitely a cultural thing. I think a lot of that actually came, right around the time when churches in the black community were formed post-slavery. There were a lot of emotions that it was a place of release for these folks that were just tied emotionally and not to mention physically for so long.
Imagine if they hadn't had that.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Exactly.
Right? Where would they have gone to process all those emotions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think again, religion doesn't get enough credit for that element too. It's a place of processing. It's a place of release. You watch some of the old mob movies, and like Corleone would walk into the pew and sit down and confess his sins. It would help him out a little bit.
Yeah.
Father, I've killed 12 people this year. 5 Hail Marys and a bucket of salt. You'll be all right, son.
It's complex. The whole process is. And I've heard. I don't know if you have ever listened to Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev. You've talked about him.
Definitely.
So he talks about
Sadhguru,
how many religions should there be in the world, and you know what he says? How many people are there in the world? There should be that many religions, because each and every one of us has our own personal relationship to God.
Sure.
Okay. And I
Paula's thinking
and I think about that, because I think if it was like that, where would the conflict be?
Yeah.
You have yours, I have mine, because even within a religion,
Yes.
you may have bylaws, you may have the administrative part of it and stuff like that, but still we've all got a personal relationship. to our creator, or to however you want to look at it, whether it's to nature, to however we process it.
Yeah.
And so, and at any given moment, that can shift, right? That can shift based on our
True.
own circumstances.
Yeah.
So I tend to have that. I tend to be in agreement with that there need to be more religions, which was, I think that's why it was like that in India. That's why so many people could live in harmony together, because one person was worshiping this deity, another person, you go to the next house, there within the same family, people would be worshiping different.
That's true.
And it was all accepted. It was like, this is okay.
Well, I don't know. Maybe your Indian background lends you to this point of view, but to me, that destroys one of the major purposes of religion, which is unity. And I have to acknowledge that that's where the Baha'i faith is coming from. Certainly, we need unity for things to be accomplished. We need unity and working together. For instance, to solve the issue of global warming, we definitely need unity. To solve the issues of religious violence, we need unity. To raise our young, we need the village. We need the connection of a solid foundation of family and community. So
what is it that's causing lack of unity? It's the idea that, this person is different from me. There goes your unity right there. This person's a different religion from me. But if there was not that conflict, doesn't it seem like there would be even more unity?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it's just a good question.
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely
like
a
if
thinker.
we respected each other and what our relationship is to God. To me, where would be the conflict?
So I think so. I think it definitely it would depend on what we're thinking of in terms of religion, because I think when we're talking about a religion that's like on the the monotheistic side, if you don't believe in this, you're gonna die. You're not just gonna die. You're gonna die a horrible death. So and
if you do believe in it, then
you're good to go.
You're going to die a good death. So then
death.
why not just die now? Because if it's going to be so much greater over there, just may as well do it now.
I mean,
why
but
live
in terms of like the thinking about it.
Yeah.
So because in the prospect of if everyone had their own religion, but what they believed in didn't cause this other person to be a hellish creature that was going to die in the fiery pits of doom, then you'd be more allowed to be like, you know what? I believe what I believe. You believe what you believe, and we still share some bread.
Well, that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
See, but this is what I'm saying.
I don't have to feel great to make you feel bad.
Right. Yeah,
or
exactly.
I don't have to be right to make you feel wrong.
Yeah.
We can agree
Yeah.
to have differences.
But here's what I think would happen in that point. I think people would still identify with something else to then make them hate
just like the uniforms in school. Like when I lived in Africa. We wore the uniforms.
Of course.
Okay.
But even with the uniforms, people found a way to be different.
Exactly.
Yeah,
rolling the waistband up.
Exactly.
Or they wear the fancy socks or some other shoe, or do their hair, what they put in their hair. They would find a way to look more, like different from other people.
Yeah.
So
well, here's a question. So what are some ways, I guess, in human history where we've been able to successfully remove like our concepts of our identity and come together in a more unified presence? What are those ways? What are those elements in society? That's my question for you guys. Where it has been successful.
Well, what has been successful?
Where we've removed like the complexities of our identity, whether it's, religion or been able to live in harmony with religion, not just live together, but live in harmony with religion or race or whatever. And people have really come together. What are those examples? And maybe let's find that way to apply that to the broader whole. So what are some of those ways?
One word that comes to my mind is inclusion.
Okay. But where have we used that?
Inclusion is when you really connect with somebody as if they are part of your life. Like if you know your neighbor, now the neighbor is included in
Yeah.
your family, kind of, and so you're not going to hate your neighbor. You're not
Yeah.
going to be fearful of your neighbor, right?
Yeah.
So to
Right.
me, including.
Well, in a personal sense, yes. But if we're thinking historically,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Pax Romana,
Okay.
and I'm thinking of the Han Dynasty.
Okay.
Two
Okay.
periods of history
Yeah.
which had a degree of peace.
Yeah.
And in both cases, there were assigned
Han Dynasty in Chinese.
social roles, and everybody stayed in their place
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. And the Pax Romana, of course, had this terrifically hierarchical administration.
Yeah.
So you had your role. Women had theirs, men had theirs, children had theirs. And so I think that business of a framework, a social framework that is fairly fixed, has a certain safety to it.
Okay.
And does allow people to get along as long as they remain in their assigned places.
Okay.
And certainly...
I mean, that happened in a big way in India as well, you know,
Sure.
with the caste system and
Yeah.
you know, it's like, yeah, you have your place, you're born there. It's because of your
Yeah.
own doing, your reincarnation, that you're in that caste and you continue to be there.
But was that based on unity or fear of retaliation for not complying?
One can't know the mindset of people in that period.
But all those societies,
Yeah.
Paula, I'm just, you know, you being the professor, I mean, how long did that last? Because those societies also, obviously, if it worked that well, we would still be doing that. Obviously, that did not work in the long run.
Yeah.
Right,
It
because
worked for a
wasn't-
short time.
It wasn't flexible
Yeah.
enough to respond to change.
Yeah.
In case of the Pax Romana, in the case of the Han Dynasty, I would probably imagine the same thing, although my
Sure.
knowledge of Chinese history is less. But Pax Romana was roughly 200 years, and the Han Dynasty was, I think, from 200 BC to 200 AD, that 400-year period.
Sure.
So it lasted a while then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you think of all the dynasties of the Egyptians and how the Egyptians were able to create these wonderful civilizations that weathered the attacks from without.
Yeah.
And it again was a very structured society.
Yeah.
So I can think this is on a smaller level. Crisis tends to bring unity. Crisis, like think of 9/11.
Fear too sometimes.
Well, fear, because you're removing the complexities of all the bullshit that doesn't matter, and you're like, well, we just gotta survive. Wait a minute,
Right.
we gotta make sure
Yeah.
we're taken care of. Like think of 9/11. You know, it's so funny. Like when you start talking about people's sort of ability to maintain their vehicle, the comforts of their home, their ability to have an iPhone, and that's sort of what the representation of these people destroying, coming in and destroying. There was this fear they're going to destroy our way of life. We've built up these civilizations, and it wasn't just America, that people felt it around the entire globe, I think, up until about the war started. Then people were like, wait, what's going on here? Wait a minute. But it's sort of that crisis, that emergency brought people together.
And crisis can be that vehicle for development.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what Erickson says too.
Okay,
In
I gotta read
terms
that
of
dude.
Individual human development is brought upon by certain crises that take place at relatively predictable periods in an individual's movement,
Okay.
aging process. And so maybe there are those crises that occur as a global community as we mature. And today we are in a period of crisis, I would say,
in a lot of ways.
in terms of the fragmentation
Sure.
occurring in so many dimensions,
very,
and specifically, ecologically. So it's a chance.
And it's
a
happening
chance
fast.
to do it
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is that humanity tends to procrastinate until the last second. Then we're like, okay, let's do something. My house is underwater right now. Wait a minute.
Yeah, better go get a boat.
Yeah, but we're good at reconstructing, though. That's our
Well,
strong suit.
And it's American strong suit. We
Sure,
have
sure.
a lot of initiative in this country, and we've allowed a lot of people to move ahead with plans.
Sure.
Your organization, for instance, and develop it according to their dreams. We have that freedom, so that's a precious thing, and I think we will lead the world into
Sure.
a better place in the crises we're in now today.
No, that's a
I
good
have
point.
trust in Americans. All
I
of
do,
us.
well, usually.
All of us, including all the immigrants and
Oh, yeah.
the people
Oh, yeah.
who are illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
But we need some leadership that can let us see
Yeah,
our
good
common,
leadership,
our
yeah.
common future together.
If you think of the term illegal immigration, the whole foundations of what we call America Today was based on violent illegal immigration. So that's
yes.
just something to ponder and to think about.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
definitely something to ponder.
But yeah, so I just kind of wonder what can we do to get people to see, because you guys are right. You both touched on it, the fragmentation of the identity, right? It's really we're tearing each other apart these days. People are short fused. You know, we're not just quick to judge, but we're quick to overact.
Yeah.
And to you know, really try to take control back into our hands, but in doing so do a lot of damage. It's not constructive control. It's damage. It's like a damaging. I'm gonna blow everything that's in existence out of the water, and just to try to remedy my view of what's wrong.
It makes you wonder if all these talk shows, whether it be TV or radio, that allow people to display the most awful kinds of behavior and difficulties are allowing for it all to come out, or should we have a little more, let's say, social decorum and moving back to a common set of ethics?
How do we do that? That's the question.
You know,
I think we need to be awakened to the situation and what we can do.
They need easy awakening.
So let's bring it down to just, instead of always looking out there, I think we can learn a lot from just focusing on ourselves. Why am I not cutting up my leg? Why am I not destroying myself?
It's vital to.
You know why? Because it's painful. You know, and I nobody has to tell me to, you know, eat right or to take care of myself, or, you know, I'm not pulling my hair out every day because it's painful. I may cut it because I can't feel the pain there. But normally the pain is what keeps us from totally destroying ourselves. Okay? For some people, even that's not enough. I mean, they're piercing themselves every which way, getting tattoos everywhere, you know, very painful process, right? And so the thing is, because we want to just, you know, save this thing, it's painful. Why do we think that we can just go and shoot up somebody else, or cut somebody else, or mug somebody else? Because you know what? We are not that whole inclusion idea. You know, that's you over here, that's me over here. I'm going to save myself, but it doesn't matter what happens to you. But if we start to become sensitive to each other, okay, nobody has to tell me anything about what I should do or shouldn't do. I will treat you in a very respectful way, and I'm not going to want to hurt you. Right? If I include you as part of me. So, no one has to tell you, don't do this, don't do that, because you know it causes pain. But see, we're so desensitized to the other. We can just push them. And now people are becoming more and more and more desensitized. They push their kids out. They can abuse their kids. They push their wives, husbands, aunts, uncles, you know, parents. Everybody's out.
Do you think a lot of these people that go to that level where they're able to sort of separate themselves and their actions against other people, do you think that they feel a little bit about what they do, but they just block it out? Or do you think they're just completely cold to it, like they're stepping on an ant?
I mean, it depends. There's not just one thing. It's probably all of those, what you said, right? More reasons. But if we look at like solutions, you know, which is what we can focus on, is the inclusion is so important.
Well,
we have to be sensitive to each other's pain. We have to be sensitive to each other's joy. You know, so that we can create more of it. We create it for ourselves, don't we?
hopefully.
So what were we going to say, Paul? before
Well,
ask
I
my
was thinking of this model of human development that I did my research on. And as you ascend to the different levels, there's 6 actually, or
Yeah.
7, you become more and more identified with larger and larger groups.
Yeah.
And the end level is you become identified with everyone.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's what you were talking about. Not that it's easy to get there,
Yeah.
but that is the trajectory.
Okay. So here's my
So-
question for you lovely ladies. Because I agree with both of you. I think you're definitely right on it. How do we implement that? We're problem solvers at Easy Awakenings. Let's brainstorm. How do we get that to get people, because it seems like a lot of
To
it's understanding.
manifest,
To
yeah.
manifest. How do
Yeah.
we get those results? How do we even begin to spill this into the world? How do we do that?
Well, conversation with people,
Okay.
getting them understanding, sharing, the kind of thing we're doing right now is part of that process, because once you're in conversation with someone, then you're first of all, you're aware of where you're coming from because
Okay.
you've said things like that, and you've heard where others are coming from. You begin to see threads and ties amongst you.
Yeah.
You begin to observe where perhaps some gaps of lack of understanding. So I think a lot of this coming together.
So they could be almost like courses, mandatory courses in school that are solely based on understanding your inclusion of who you are with other people. Because you don't learn about that, right? You
No.
learn about other cultures to some degree.
You generally learn who you are through your parents and the others in your authority figures in your
Yeah.
milieu, wherever
Yeah.
you grow up.
Yeah, your teachers,
But yeah, like-
your friends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But a class is something where it's important to understand your connectivity
Yeah.
with the world, the people in the world around you. I think introducing that into schools would be a good idea.
Well, they do now have classes that learn about other faiths in middle
Okay.
school
Yeah.
and other cultures. When Wisdom presented their 5 Women, 5 Journeys at the Covington Middle School in Bloomfield Hills, they shared with me all of the other cultures they're learning about, and they're
Yeah.
learning about it through stories, not through facts and, here's the history, but through stories of real people that give them an insight,
Sure.
a sense of empathy with
Sure,
the other experience growing up. I think
Okay.
that is very effective.
Because when you touched on that, that was my next question for you. Because it's we now live in a world where there's information available. We actually learn a lot more about other cultures today than we did, 5 years ago even.
Yeah.
But there still seems to be this fragmentation. So when you said it's there's an emphasis on relatability, is that kind of what you were saying when these courses that they're teaching?
Well, they're teaching people the experiential level of another's culture and rearing. So
Okay.
you are able then to develop an empathetic
Okay.
response to that.
Because some people see that stuff and they don't necessarily grow empathic or empathetic to what they're seeing. They might see it as almost as ammunition, right? If they have a predisposition, let's say they come from a home that is typically adverse to diversity, that education might be like, yeah, those guys are very different from me,
Yeah.
So how do we get them to see their connection with those other cultures that they're learning about?
There are already schools in the world.
Sure.
I know in India it's the Krishnamurti school.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Jay
yes.
Krishnamurti,
yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
He's already doing this.
Yeah.
And what does he do in his school? What does he do? He just focuses on the person learning about themselves.
Yeah.
To not get this, to keep their mind clear.
So
To
it's-
not have anybody be the authority of their mind, so that they can find their own power. It's not like it's not happening. We
Oh,
have
sure,
plenty
sure.
of examples where it's working beautifully.
Okay.
But I think we just have to spread that
That's
message.
the thing. It's got to. We need to proliferate that. That's
Yes.
got to be. But how do we put that in the mainstream? How does it become palatable?
Well,
For,
I think you develop little cells where
Okay.
it's activated.
Grassroots movements.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's
They're
going to
very
happen at the
powerful.
grassroots.
yeah.
Yes.
I think the future of change is all going to be grassroots.
Grassroots, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Light is always more powerful than darkness.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
The darkness doesn't really have power.
Darkness has no power
Right,
because
right.
it's just
the
the absence
of light.
Absence, yes.
You just
I
run.
think we can.
You're
I
just
think we
running
can do a. yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's true.
So
That's
really,
true.
it's about us working on ourselves to bring that light.
Sure.
You know, take those opposing forces
Yeah.
and allow them to harmonize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We sit with somebody who has a belief system which is different from our own.
Well, and I think I'll add on to that. I think including the emergency nature of it, right? It's an urgent situation that needs to happen.
Yes.
Because what we're
We have
doing,
to apply it. We can't
do.
just keep talking about
exactly,
it.
because people that are in the right mindset will talk about the importance of understanding the power of light versus the powerlessness or the dangers of just remaining in the dark. But in order for people to develop that, people have to understand when you attack other people of your own culture, you're cutting off your own leg. And what happens when you cut off all your own body parts? You start doing damage.
Pain.
But see, again, the fact that you're even thinking about
Yeah.
the culture, so that brings that difference. You're thinking about culture.
Right,
You're
right,
thinking
right.
about your own race. You're thinking about your own sex. This exclusion.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Baha'i community now is focusing on racial amity, which is a way of really saying racial unity. And they're having these discussions in communities where Baha'is reside. And they're having discussions and they're sharing. And what is it like to feel like your race is somehow less worthy? And
Sure.
what kinds of things make you feel that way? And so they're sharing at a very human level.
Yeah.
And as we talked about, grassroots sharing of human experience.
I think,
Of
yeah.
course, it has to be somewhat guided, I think, by somebody who kind of knows the
Sure.
dynamics of working in groups. But
Yeah.
But
And with the
first,
right
we have to
mindset.
recognize that what we're doing right now is not working.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. We're headed
You know
down
what
to
I'm
a
saying?
cliff,
What
yeah.
we're doing in the schools now, the way that
Oh, yeah.
it is
Oh, yeah.
not working.
Yeah.
Why do we continue to do it?
We were talking about that with Brian. It's a mill. You're churning out people for the workforce. Is
well,
basically.
you're churning out people who can pass the test.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And those who have different ways of thinking or testing.
Yeah.
I had to accommodate that even as a college teacher.
Mhm.
I've started getting people who were handicapped in certain ways, and there would be alternatives for them to
Yeah.
succeed through different testing methods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, you're right about it, and that's why I bring up the school system, because it's much harder to change someone who's 40. That mindset,
Well, true.
it's possible. It's definitely possible, and I think that people that are in that age range should definitely find the hope and the inspiration they need to feel empowered in life and understand their inclusion, understand that they can make changes and so on.
But it is easy, Marquise.
It's easy
It's
with
easy,
the younger
but
one.
I don't care. Yeah, easy awakenings. Doesn't matter what
Yeah.
age you are.
Yeah.
You
That's a
can
good
change.
note.
Oh no, it
That's
is.
a good
Yeah.
note to stop.
Oh yeah.
For me. I'm out of time.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
yeah. We'll continue this on another day. This was a great conversation, though. I
It
think
was.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah,
wonderful
yeah.
conversation. I had a great time.
Awesome.
I've got a number of messages I need to respond
Sure.
to.
Do you want to leave anything for the audience, like
Yeah.
a shout out, or they can check
Anything
something out?
you
or-
want to
I mean, we can
share about
like
anything.
some endeavors that you might be a part of, or bring some awareness to some groups or something, or telling people to
Or
donate
give
to
credit
Easy
to
Awakenings.
somebody
would be
that's
kinda-
helped you or anything.
Yeah. If
I
you
think
want to.
I've shared enough.
There you go. Okay. Okay.
All the things I really cared about, I've mentioned at some point.
Okay. Awesome.
So,
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Again, thanks for watching, guys. We'll talk to you soon. I won't bring up the next week's or next guest because they might be in different orders. So, have a good day.
Bye bye, everyone.